Bismillah Rahman Rahim. Technical problem of a mobile, and that is why delivery is delayed. After watching a long time, after watching Eid al-Fitr, after watching, after fasting a month, we have come in front of the camera. I think you are not well because of this pandemic, and sound na? Because of this pandemic and that is why the ruling government, our Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, the daughter of Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, has taken a wise decision to take your classes for your compensation, and that is why I present now. In the previous classes, remember it, in the previous classes I completed transformational sentences, and today I want to discuss the correct form of verbs. That is a very important item for you, and that is why listen attentively what I say. When you try to correct form of verbs, at first you have to demarcate the clauses, and then you have to take a decision. When you find one verb in a clause, in that time you have to do the applying of tenses and the applying of voice sense. And when you find more verbs in a clause, you have to do the non-finite. And today I want to discuss, when you find in a clause one verb, in the time, what is your action? In that time, you have to use 12 tenses according to the sign and evidence of this sentence. That is, when you find the sentence is present simple, then you find some sign. By using some signs and evidence, you can use present simple, and that is when you find sometimes, generally, regularly, always, often, frequently, or adverb of manner, or sometimes you find universal truth of this sentence or habitual action of this sentence, then you can use present simple tense. When in a clause you find another sign or symptom, that is now, at present, at the moment, and nowadays, you can use present progressive tense. And when you find just now, already, recently, lately, yet, ever, in the time you can use present perfect tense. And when you find for or since, that means for a period of time, and the since, the point of time. In the time, you can use present perfect tense and present perfect progressive tense. And when you find yesterday, ago, before, former, in the past, in the last year, last month, long since, fancy, it is high time, and any type of past year, then you can use past simple tense. And when you find tomorrow, the next day, you can use future simple tense. And when you find a list in a sentence, you can use after subject should or might or a present form of the verb. And sometimes you find a conditional sentences, that means if, had, and when you find at the beginning of the sentence if or had, and the first clause of this sentence is present, and the second clause will be can, may, will, and root verb. And when you find the past simple of the conditional sentence, then you can use could, may, could, might, or would, and the next clause will be when you find past simple of the first clause, then you can use would, could, might, and root verb. And when you find past perfect of the first clause, then you can use in the second clause would have, could have, might have, and past participle of the verbs. That means here you find three conditional sentence. When you find this conditional sentence, you have to follow the first clause, and then you can use the correct form of verbs in the next clause. When you find present simple, then you can use in the second clause can, may, will, and root verb. And when you find past simple, then you can use would, could, might, and root verb. And when you find past perfect, then you can use would have, could have, might have, and past participle of the verbs. In this way, you can use correct form of verbs when you find one verb in a clause. Through an example, we notice that sometimes the boy come here. Look at the whiteboard. Sometimes the boy come here. Here we find one clause and one finite verb, and that is why you have to need using only tenses. But from these tenses, which type of tense you can use here, and for this you have to need some sign and symptom. This is a sign, this is a symptom. Sometimes according to sometimes you can use present simple, and the answer of this sentence only comes. Here it is very interesting when in place of sometimes, here you find last night, you find last night, then the answer will be changed, came. This is totally dependent on the sign and symptom of this sentence. In place of last night, here we find tomorrow. Tomorrow. The answer will be will come. This is the very interesting fact. When the sign and symptom of this sentence will be changed, the answer will be automatically changed, because when you have done the correct form of verbs, you have to notice when you find one verb in a clause, you have to take a perfect decision by the help of this sign and symptom. Here we find another interesting example. Rice eat. When you find at the beginning, I suggested you, I told you, when you find in a clause one verb, you have to take a decision. Is it sense of active or sense of passive? When you find the sense of active, you have to use the tenses, and that is the that will be used by the help of sign and symptom of the sentences. And here we find the sense of passive. Rice is completely unable to do the work, and that is why the answer of this question is eaten or is being eaten or has been eaten. In this way, the variation of this answer, at the beginning I find one verb, the boy come. There we write comes, will come, has come, according to the sign and symptom, and there we find the sense of the sentence is active, and that is why in the time you can use tenses. But when you find one verb in a clause and the sense of passive, you have to do the passive in this way. This is eaten, or is being eaten, or has been eaten, all are correct, because this is the sense of passive. Here it is very noticeable that in a clause we find one verb, three actions, two actions, that is use of tenses and use of passive. And when the sentence is active, you have to do the use of tenses according to the sign and symptom. But when the sense of passive, you have to do the passive. And another action of this verb, when we find more verbs in a clause, through an example, we notice that in this way, picnic is a meal, eat out of doors. Look at the whiteboard, a very interesting matter. Picnic is a meal, eat out of doors. In this sentence, we find two verbs, and here the answer of this sentence is eaten. But why? What is the reason? What is the fact? Here in this sentence we find two verbs, is and eat. When you find in a clause two or more verbs, one verb will be finite and another, all verbs will be non-finite. And here you can say non-finite has some variation, and that is when you find the sense of active, you can use participle or gerund, and when you find the sense of passive, you can use sense of passive, and when you find the purpose, cause, condition and result, you can use infinitive. In this way, here this is the sense of active, because meal is completely unable to do the work, and that is why the answer of this sentence is eaten. Through another example, the boy is come from market. Here we find two verbs, is and come. According to the decision, when you find more verbs in a clause, you have to do the non-finite, but here the non-finite, the answer of this sentence is coming. But what is the difference between two? At the beginning of this sentence, picnic is a meal, there eat out of doors, there the answer of this question eaten. But here we find the boy is come from market. Here also we find two verbs. One verb will be non-finite, and the answer of this sentence is coming, and that is the sense of active, and that is why the answer of this question is coming. Do you understand? I mean, another example. Through another example, I mentioned here. I went to post office, post the letter. Here in this sentence we find two verbs, went and post. Look at the whiteboard very seriously. You find a variation of this non-finite. Somewhere we find sense of passive, and sometimes we find the sense of active, and here we find the purpose cause condition, and that is why we have to do the infinitive, to do, to post, to post. To post. But you notice the variation of these three sentences. Another interesting non-finite, it is very invisible, and that is bare infinitive. How is it? I saw him go up over the hill. Here we find two verbs. The answer will be non-finite. At the beginning, I told you, when you find a verb in a clause, in that time you have to use tenses or passive. Tenses will be applied when the sense of the sentence will be active, and when you find the sense of the sentence is passive, you have done or you will do the passive. And when you find in a sentence more verbs, one verb will be finite and another verbs will be non-finite. In this way, here we find two verbs, saw and go. So according to the decision, this verb will be non-finite, and here we can answer only go or going. How's it? This is the bare infinitive. When you find in a sentence, let's see, watch, behold, hear, make, love, feel, please, help, keep, remain, modal verb and do verb, then the next verb will be bare infinitive, and that is to is completely absent here. In that time, you can use another substitute answer, going, but you cannot use to go. This is completely wrong. In that time, you can use two types answer, and that is go or going. This is fully correct. And when in that condition you can write you write to go, it will be a wrong answer. To go is completely absurd answer, so it is crossed. And the perfect answer and the appropriate answer of this question, go or going. Look at the another important exercise, and that is the boy just received the letter. Here we find one verb, one clause. When we find one verb in a one clause, in the time you have to take a decision, it will be active or passive. It is totally dependent on the subject of this sentence. When the subject is able to do the work, there you can use the tenses, and that is the answer of this question has received, R-E-C-I-V-E-D, received. But when the sentence is the letter just received, R-E-C-I-V-E-D. Here also we find one verb in a clause. In the time you cannot write has received. The answer will be has been received. Has been received, R-E-C-I-V-E-D, received. Here we find a special variation and very interesting difference between two. The boy is active, the sense of active, and that is why the answer has received, and the sign of this sentence is just now, already, and recently. When you find this symptom, you can use present perfect. When the sense of this sentence will be active, then the answer will be has received, and when the sense of this sentence will be passive and just is alive, but the variation of this answer has been received. This is the difference between two. This is sense of active, and this is the sense of passive, and that is why here we notice the variation of these sentences. Today I want to give you another example of the more verbs in a sentence. That is, look at the whiteboard very carefully. This is very interesting answer. That is English teach here is an international language. Look at the sentence. Here English teach here is an international language. In this sentence we find two verbs, and that is teach and is. You can ask me, the answer will be non-finite, but why? Look at the whiteboard. In the last example, we find one verb in a clause, but in this sentence we find more verbs in a clause, and that is why the answer of this sentence will be non-finite, and that is TAUGST, taught, teaching, to teach. Which is correct? The correct answer of this sentence is taught, and teaching and to teach is completely wrong answer, because the sense of this sentence is passive, and that is why the non-finite will be taught. Teaching and to teach is completely fake answer. I mean, this is the sense of passive of this sentence, and in this clause we find two verbs, and the decision of this sentence and the answer of this sentence will be non-finite, and that is taught, only taught, not is taught, only taught. Similar example, English teach here. In this sentence we find only one verb, one clause, and that is why the answer of this sentence will be is taught, is being taught, has been taught, various types of answer you can use here, but all answers will be non-finite. All answer will be passive, because English teach here we find one verb, and that is why the all answer will be passive. And in the first sentence, English teach here is an international language, there we find two verbs, and that is why the answer will be non-finite, and this non-finite taught is correct. But English teach here, these are same, but very interesting variation between two. Here we find two verbs, and here we find only one verb, and that is why the answer is varied here. Taught and is taught, is being taught, and has been taught, all are same. When we find the one verb and the sense of passive of this sentence, it will be passive answer, is taught, is being taught, or has been taught, all will be passive. Today I taught you, I teach you the correct form of verbs and from this answer you will find three types of action, and that is, when you find one verb in a clause, there you can use tenses or passive, and when you use tenses according to the sign and symptom of this sentence, and when you find the sense of passive of this sentence, subject is unable to do the work, you can use passive sense, passive. And when you find in a clause more verbs, you have to do the non-finite, and there I give you some example, that is various types of non-finite, and that is sense of active and sense of passive, and when you find the purpose cause condition, you can use the non-finite of the infinitive, and non-finite of the gerund or participle. These types of non-finite will be applied when you find more verbs in a clause, and when you find one verb in a clause, you have to use tenses and passive. Anyway, in the next classes, I will give you some exercise, and you will try your best to do the exercise, and no more today. Wishing you to be quite okay. Thank you everybody. Thank you.